vSphere security. Alright, so you have this great virtual infrastructure, and now you're challenged with how to secure it, how to give different people access to it without compromising the very basics of security and allowing them to log in and get access to the things that they need to get access to, but not more than that. Now, this is known as role-based access, and I am a big fan of role-based access, whether it's for the virtual infrastructure or whether it's for Active Directory or anything else. Users should only have access to the things that they need. Other administrators, whether junior administrators or senior administrators, need access only to the systems that they directly administer and need to have enough privileges to do their daily functions and complete their tasks on time. Nobody should be given full rights, and those that should be given full rights should be very, very few. And the reason for that is not because somebody wants to feel like he has the power. That's not the point. The point is the fewer people that have full security or a lot of security, the fewer people you can hold accountable in the event that something happens or something goes wrong. If you have 10 people that have full access and something goes wrong, now you have 10 people to ask, okay, so what happened? But if you have 2 people with full access and something goes wrong, then you're going to come to these people, tell me which one of you did it. And if one of them happens to be on vacation, then you know it's the other one. It's a given. So role-based access is really important, and we're going to be talking about that in this module. Let's closely examine now the components that make up the security in Virtual Center. So at the very bottom here, you have user and group. And a user and group is an account that has access to log on to the infrastructure, to Virtual Center. Now, the second thing you're going to notice here is a role. What is a role? A role is a collection of privileges, and privileges are the right to perform a specific task. So you can have the privilege of shutting down a virtual machine, or rebooting a virtual machine, or backing up a virtual machine. That is a privilege. Now, a role is a collection of privileges, which means if you have the role of a backup administrator, for example, you might have multiple privileges within that role, like shutting down a virtual machine, rebooting it, backing it up, restoring it. That constitutes a role. Now, a permission. A permission is the marriage between a role and a user group. So you have a user or a group that has the role of a backup administrator, and you are assigning this role or this permission to an object. So for example, you're assigning this permission on a container within Virtual Center that has multiple virtual machines that you want to allow a person or a group to be able to run backups on. So you assign a permission on a particular object within Virtual Center. Now, there are 2 types of users and groups and permissions within the virtual infrastructure. You have the Virtual Center users and groups, which are either based on the local users and groups from the Virtual Center server, local users and groups, or you have the Active Directory plugin, so that Virtual Center can plug into Active Directory and use users and groups from within Active Directory to assign permissions on its objects. And then you have the ESX local users and groups that are based on the Service Console. Now, in the next slide here, we're going to take a look at some of the default roles. You'll notice on the left I have the ESX specific default roles, and it only has 3 of them. Basically, no access, read-only, and administrator. And then on the right, you have the default roles for Virtual Center, and they're also listed. So we're in Virtual Center. Let's take a look at how we can create new roles. So if you focus your attention under the administration section here, you'll notice that we have an icon for roles. If you click on roles, you have the ability to either add roles, or you have here listed the default roles, so you can always modify these roles. You can always right click on the virtual machine user here and scroll down to where it says edit role, and you can modify this role, and you can get very granular with it. Now, on the other hand, if we wanted to create a totally new role, we can always click on add role up here, and we can give this role a name. So let's say, for example, we want to call this Eli's group, if there was such a group in your environment. And for Eli's group, we want to give all the privileges. We can just select this, and if you want to drill down and, for example, select a few privileges that you don't want to give to this role, you can always drill down and just uncheck whatever you don't want to give this role. We're going to click on OK here and see if it shows up in the list, and there it is. Now, once you've created the role, or if you want to use one of the existing default roles, Now you are ready to assign permissions on a particular object. So we're going to go back to the home screen here, and we're going to go into hosts and clusters. Now the exercise we're about to do here can apply to any object within the inventory. It doesn't have to apply to the ESX01 object that we're going to use, for example. It can apply to virtual machines, it can apply to containers, to clusters, to data centers, etc., etc. So if we select ESX01, we can either right click on ESX01 and drag down to where it says add permission, or we can select the tab permissions here, and you'll notice that the administrators already has full control over this because they have full control at the top of the hierarchy. So again, and before we actually add a permission here, if you add a permission to a parent, then anything within any subfolders or any sub-objects within the parent object will automatically inherit that permission. Now, if you wanted to apply a permission, for example, at the parent but deny permission to a certain object, then any permission you set at the object level will override the permission coming down from the parent. Now that being said, if you have Eli, for example, who's a member of two groups, and those two groups both have permissions on the same object, and in group A, Eli has the permission to restart the machine, and in group B, Eli also have the permission to back up the machine, then in this case, it's going to merge these rights, and Eli will have the right to back up the machine and restart the machine as well, because he's a member of both groups, and each group has a distinct privilege, a distinct role. However, on the other hand, if Eli was a member of a group that had no rights over this particular object, and another group that had read-only rights over a particular object, then the most restrictive of both rules will apply, and in this case I'd have no access to it. So again, we've selected ESX01 and we want to add permission. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click here, and we're going to click on add permission, and over here from the drop down menu we're going to select the role that we just created earlier on. So I'm going to scroll down, and you'll notice that here it is, Eli's group. Now we've assigned the role. Now we need to tell Virtual Center which users and which groups we want to give this role and assign to this object. Now earlier on when I was talking to you during the lecture, I told you that a permission is the marriage between a user and group, or a group and a role, and here's where you see it very evident. So we've selected the role. Now we need to select the group. So I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to select the local machine, and from this local machine I'm actually going to show the groups first. I'm going to select backup operators. We're going to click on OK, and we are going to click on OK again, and there it is. So I've added backup operators to this ESX host. Now again, I can do this to multiple objects in the inventory. The process is going to be the same. Okay, from here let's go back to the presentation. Let's take a look at web access and see how we can use and leverage web access to complete certain tasks. Why would I need to use web access? Web access can come in handy if you don't have the vSphere client installed on a machine and you need to do some basic administrative functions. You can get any machine, any physical or virtual machine that has web access, and then you can point to the IP address or fully qualified domain name of your virtual center server and get access to do certain tasks and certain functions from within web access. Now keep in mind that web access is a limited tool, so you won't be able to do everything that you can do from within virtual center or the vSphere client, but it gives you access to do certain things. So for example, I've listed here the tasks that you're allowed to do with web access. So you can monitor, you can generate virtual machine shortcuts, you can configure virtual machine settings, so you can change those settings, you can control a virtual machine's power operations, shut it down, power it back on, reset, suspend, whatever. You can manage snapshots, you could do a remote console as long as you're using Internet Explorer or Firefox. You can add, remove virtual machines from the inventory. So while you can't delete and you can't create virtual machines, if there's a virtual machine that already exists in the inventory, you can always add it into Virtual Center, and if there's a virtual machine that you want to remove from inventory, you can remove it from Virtual Center. So let's go ahead and log into Web Access and take a look at how we can do all of these functions. So we've launched Internet Explorer, and we browse to the IP address of our virtual center server. Now keep in mind here, you can always browse to the actual ESX host as well, but in this case, in order to take advantage and manage the whole environment, we are going to browse to the virtual center IP address, and virtual center has a web server on it that allows us to browse and manage certain tasks in our virtual infrastructure. So once here, we're going to click on the log on or log into web access. And for the username and password, it's the same username and password that you have when you log on to the vSphere client. So any user that has access through the vSphere client will have access through web access as well. Now obviously the roles and permissions will apply as well here. Now once you're logged in, you're going to select which container you want to try and manage and what you're trying to manage. So I'm going to expand here a little bit. Now once the inventory is loaded, you can select any one of these virtual machines, and you're going to notice that it's going to populate the information that you can manipulate with regards to this virtual machine. And like I mentioned during the lecture, if you click up here on where it says virtual machine, you will see the tasks that you can do. So for example, you can add a virtual machine to inventory, you can remove a virtual machine from inventory, you can manipulate the power, you could take, manage snapshots, and then you have access to the console. You also have access to do certain tasks from the right pane here. So again, you can manipulate the power. These are just quick access commands or quick commands that you can do right away. You can generate a virtual machine shortcut, and a virtual machine shortcut can come in handy if you want to give certain users access to this virtual machine directly, but you don't want to give them the vSphere client, or you don't want, you just want to be able to send them an email, put a shortcut in that email, they double click on it, and boom, they log into the virtual machine that way. So that's an easy way to get users to get access to their virtual machines in an easier fashion. Down here it tells you the relationships, how this virtual machine is connected to which host, which data store, etc. You'll notice some of this stuff is a little bit grayed out. Again, here with regards to the hardware and the settings of the virtual machine, you can manipulate those if the virtual machine is powered off. And then we can click up here. You have the ability, and I'm going to leave console to the end, but you have the ability to look at the alarms when it comes to this particular object that you're working with. So in this case, this virtual machine, you can look at its alarms, you can look at its tasks, and you can obviously look at its events. Now it'll take a few seconds to load here, and voila, it populated them. Now let's click on the console tab, and you notice we have to install a plugin in order to make the console work. So we're going to go ahead and run it. It's going to go through a very basic setup wizard here. No configuration tasks whatsoever. Install, and voila, it's going to go through the installation. We're going to try not to close all instances of Internet Explorer. I'm going to click on next. I'm going to click on finish. Alright, now that the console is open, we can always click anywhere, Control Alt Insert, and voila, we can log into the virtual machine, do whatever we need to do to it, and then when we're done we can just close out and exit. So this is kind of a very slick feature for you to get access to your virtual environment when you're away kind of from your laptop or your desktop, or you have the vSphere client installed and you just need to do certain specific tasks. You can do them from within the web access. And that's it for security and web access, folks. I hope this module has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.